Hello and welcome back to Rolling Solo in a brand new gameplay series of Arkham Horror, the card game. We are going to be playing through all the base 3 scenarios of the campaign called Night of the Zealot, which is right here. So we'll be playing through these 3 scenarios together, and hopefully we'll be able to get through this without being devoured, destroyed, or taken out. So what I've done here is I've set up the very first scenario, and what we're not going to cover, just so you understand, is that we're not going to cover the setup in terms of how to build a character deck. Like in this case, we have Roland Banks who we're going to be playing with, so I've already pre-set up the deck based on what's in the rule book in terms of how you're supposed to build the deck, but I'm not going to get into the details of how to set it up and what cards are involved and what's inside of it. We'll leave that up to you when you pick the game up to see that stuff. But you'll also see it as the gameplay unfolds. So either way, I guess you'll see it. What I've done is I put Roland in the study, which is where he's starting this particular campaign. And we've got 2 different cards behind him, one called the Agenda deck and the other is called the Act deck. And so these are 2 different cards that are on kind of like a timer. So the one on the right is the Act deck. This is what we're as a group, or that you and I are trying to really churn through together. We want to get through the story as quick as possible. And in this case, I know there's 3 cards, but I don't know what's coming. On the left side, we've got the Agenda deck, and this is obviously the evil side of things. The Cthulhu, Madness, Insanity, and Monsters are controlled by the Agenda deck. And this is going to push the story in a negative tone if this goes too far. So the tokens that will be put on the left side will be Doom tokens. They look like this. And then on the opposite side, for the Act, they're going to look like this. So essentially, that's why there's a 2 down there in the bottom right, because you're going to need 2 clues in order to pass it. And on this side, the Agenda deck, which is the evil side, is going to use Doom tokens, and once they get 3, this card will flip. So that's essentially how those work in a nutshell. And so what we have here is we have the Encounter deck over here to the left. We'll put a discard pile here. We've got everything kind of set up here. I've got a bag full of tokens. Now what I've done for this game is set up for a standard or easy game. So there's a reference card that comes in the game, and it kind of gives you an idea as to playing the game either easy, standard, or you can flip it over if you're tired of that and go to the hard side. Well, for this playthrough, I'd like to play easy and standard because I think that you guys would rather see a possible chance of victory versus a maybe consistent loss, like over and over and over again. So that would be no fun to watch. So essentially, we're going to go for easy standard. So we'll reference these 3 symbols as we come across them. They're going to come out of this bag, which is full of tokens. And those tokens, what I've done actually, I think it's kind of cool, is I've taken some coin cases and I've put them around the actual token just to give it some weight, make it feel like it's a little bit more sturdy, and it kind of feels like a poker chip, which is kind of nice, keeps them protected. And because we're going to be digging through this bag a lot, banging them around, I just thought, you know what, it'd be kind of cool. They sound cool when they're in the bag. You know, you reach in, you pull one, and you hope that it's like something that's not going to take away from your skill check. So just for those of you that don't know, this bag is essentially replacing a dice system, which is what Arkham Horror and Eldritch Horror are solely based in. This Arkham Horror, the card game, is based in a bag of tokens that modify your skill checks based on what you pull out of it. So it's similar, but just a different mechanic. But I think why they did this is so that it allows them the freedom to change this on the fly per expansion, and in the future they can really do whatever they want with it. They can always change these reference cards each scenario or even each expansion to match up and create different variants of a certain scenario, or totally change the gameplay. Like Lord of the Rings, the card game, for instance, has a lot of change throughout it in terms of how they handle standard things. Like a standard token like this death token here, so the one at the top, you know, that might actually mean something totally different when the Dunwich Legacy expansion comes out, right? So stuff like that. So anyway, getting back to the gameplay, what I'd like to do in this very first episode is rip through maybe about 10 minutes or so starting now of the very first few hands, I guess, as much as we can get through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the campaign guide, Night of the Zealot. So this is spoiler material, so if you have not played the game, you don't want to see any of it, you don't want to ruin any of it, then I advise you to kind of run away. But if you have already played the game or you're interested in maybe what the first campaign scenario is like, then feel free to stick around with this is your warning to say that we're jumping into content that you're going to be paying for, right? If you want to go ahead and pick this up. So you've been warned. So we're moving into the campaign guide, Night of the Zealot. I sure hope. Zealot. I think it's Zealot. So the text for this, we've got Ghoul's Hunger. So Friday, September 18th, 1925, Arkham, Massachusetts. It is the end of a long and abnormally hot summer. The first hints of autumn beckon, but a heavy heat persists, relentless. A silent, unspoken anger grips the town. Tempers are short, and in the last week alone there have been numerous reports of townspeople coming to heated, violent blows with one another over simple misunderstandings. And now, a call from James Hankerson. He claims to have found a dismembered body in his barn. Not good. Blaming the weather would be too easy. There is something wrong with this town, and not a whole lot of this old soothsayer can do to stop the slide. My algorithm, I can't pronounce that, indicate a small group of investigators will soon take note of these strange happenings and set forth to make things right. I'll be watching their progress, but I won't be holding my breath. So this is kind of the setup, and every single scenario has some text. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm not going to show the camera because it has a section really quick that I'll show you a little glimpse of it that says do not read. And so there's portions of that you don't want to look at until you're actually through it. So what I'm going to do is take a look at the first little text here. That'll give you some more clues as to kind of what we're doing, but I'm not going to spoil anything else. So part 1, The Gathering. You and your partners have been investigating strange events taking place in your home city of Arkham, Massachusetts. Over the past few weeks, several townspeople have mysteriously gone missing. Recently, their corpses turned up in the woods, savaged and half-eaten. The police and newspapers have stated that wild animals are responsible, but you believe there is something else going on. You are gathered together at the lead investigator's home to discuss these bizarre events. Now, just so that you're aware, I'm not playing this game two-handed. So I'm going to explain this really, really quick, as fast as I can. The game specifically says in the rules that there's a method to table talk. In other words, you're supposed to talk to each other about about helping each other throughout the campaign. However, you're not supposed to tell the people that you're playing with what you have in your hand. So this is very different than some other card games that Fantasy Flight came out with. But in my mind, I just don't see playing this game two-handed as being an option, because you're really ruining things, because you can actually see both hands and you can actually min-max your game to make sure that you're making the most efficient moves all the time if you're playing double-handed. So in my opinion, it's kind of a little bit cheap and a little bit easier than if you were playing with two people who can only speak in generic terms but not talk specifically about what's in your hands. So because of this, I choose to just pick one investigator. So because the campaign talks as if a whole bunch of investigators are in the study together, we're only going to have one. And that's okay, because this game can be played solo. And that is what the name of this channel is, so that is what we're going to do. So, starting off, Roland Banks, he has 5 sanity, 9 health, and he has these stats up in the top right, and those stats are going to help him throughout the campaign to make checks and whatnot. And what we got here is willpower, we have intellect, combat, agility, and then there's, I think there's a wild check that comes out later on. So he has a couple special abilities. After you defeat an enemy, discover one clue at your location. So if there is a clue to discover, you get that clue. And then every time you pull an Elder Sign, you get an effect, which is +1 for each clue on that location. So that's actually really good. So now at the beginning of every single game, your investigators always get 5 resources. So we're going to give Roland his 5 resources, or what I like to call boxes, crates. So now Roland's got 5. He's also going to take 4 cards from the top here. So he's going to build his hand. And of course, now this is another rule that's part of the game as well. So once you take your starting hand, if you have taken any treachery cards, you take that treachery card out, and you go ahead and you pick up a new card until you don't have any treacheries in your hand anymore, because you're not allowed to have one on your first go around. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to do a little bit of muddling about to move this treachery card back into the deck. Cut it a bunch of times, so I don't know where the heck it ends up. Just kind of moving stuff around. Okay, buried that thing. So it's in there again, I just don't know exactly where. And we've got our starting hand. So these are essentially the cards that we're going to be going through, and you guys can take a look at them here in order to see like what we have. Now, there's one thing I just already made a mistake on, but it's actually 5 cards, not 4. So there we go. So we got our 5 cards. So we got ourselves manual dexterity, max 1 committed. So every time you should commit to 1 skill test. If you're successful at skill test, you get a card. This one's really great for when you're running around trying to avoid anything that's not an elite enemy. You can barricade the room and keep them out from coming in. This one gives you pure supplies and doesn't cost anything. This is called Guts and max 1 committed per skill test. If this test is successful, draw a card, and then of course a knife, which is always good. And it just gives you a boost to your fighting ability. So essentially there is a round sequence for this game, which is right here. And you can see at the very, very top, it says Mythos phase. Skip during the first round. So we're not gonna do the Mythos phase. What we are gonna do is quickly read the story text on the cards sitting in front of us. So we'll go ahead and we're gonna read the act deck and the agenda deck. So first we'll start from the what's going on the agenda deck. And it says, it is late at night and you are holed up in your study researching the bloody disappearances that have been taking place in the region. A few hours into your research, you hear the sound of strange chanting coming from your parlor down the hall. At the same time, you hear dirt churning as if something was digging beneath the floor. Well, that's not good. And then in terms of the story for us and what we have to progress through as investigators, as you leap to investigate, the door to your study vanishes before your eyes, leaving behind only a solid wall. You're trapped inside your study until you can find another way out. So now if we take a look at the study card, you can see actually that the study itself actually does have a door that has vanished. And if you go down a little further, you can see that there's some story text there saying, you've been investigating the strange events occurring in Arkham for several days now. Your desk is covered in newspaper articles, police reports, and witness accounts. So I've been a little bit obsessed with trying to come to terms with what's going on in the city, and I've sat in my study a little too long, and now the door has vanished. So we've got our starting hands. We're going to flip the study, because this is what happens at the very beginning of the game, is you flip the rooms that you're always inside of. And what this is going to do is give you some information. So on the left here, we've got what's considered a shroud value. So this is like when you're trying to investigate to find clues, which is the number of clues is on the right there, right here. And the little symbol with the hat, the little person with the hat, is an investigator symbol, and it says that it's every single, this room, for instance, if I'm playing 1 player, is 2 clues, but if I was playing with 2 investigators, it'd be 4, so you just double it, essentially. So what this 2 on this side means is every single time I want to get one of those clues, I'm going to have to make a check where I reach in the bag and try to pull based on my intellect, which is down here, the second one with the purple book right there. I'm going to have to make a check, so I'm going to be starting with 3. I'm going to pull something out of this bag, and I'm hoping that it's higher than the shroud value. If it's higher than the shroud value, then I get the clue. If it's lower, I've failed the check and I've wasted an action. There isn't any kind of negative repercussions on investigating, but except just wasting an action doing it. So how this works now is we'll come back over here, and we know we're skipping the Mythos phase, so that whole first section there of number 1 doesn't count. So we'll move into the investigative phase, which is each investigator takes a turn performing 3 actions. So actions, you flip this over if you want to see. You've got yourself draw a card or gain a resource, play an event or asset, activate a kind of like arrow ability. You can move to a different room, which we can't at the moment because we're stuck in our study. We can investigate your location. You can fight or engage of an enemy if there's one, and you can attempt to evade one to keep yourself from taking damage. And then there's also some free abilities on the bottom there. The lightning bolt and the revolving arrow shows that those things are free to activate at any time. Something like this, for instance, like after you defeat an enemy, like that would just happen. I would get a clue and it wouldn't cost me an action. So we get to choose 3 of these actions. You can do the same action 3 times if you want to. And in this case, we know that the study, after flipping this card, has 2 clues. So let's go ahead and put 2 clues in the study. So we know that this has 2 clues that we can pick up potentially in the study. So what should we do first? Well, taking a look at our hand, I'm already kind of excited by the fact that we've got a knife. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna take the knife as my first action, I'm gonna play it. When I play this down, I have to use or pay the resource total up here in the top left. And it also has a hand symbol, so now it's taking up a hand slot on me, so I'm 1 less hand free. So I gotta take 1 resource away, and I've paid for that knife. That is 1 action. That's all it was just getting that knife equipped. It was an action. So now, with this action or this knife equipped, what I'm going to do is probably investigate, because I really don't want to waste any time getting through this story. And in order to advance the story, I need 2 clues. Well, the study has 2 clues, so let's get through those clues really quick. So if I go down here, if I'm going after an investigation action, right, then you're going to be using your intellect, which is the 3 right here with the book, right? If I am not happy with that number and I want to raise it before or adjust my skill before I pull a random token out of the bag, you can actually use cards out of your hand, and you can use these little symbols right here to the left of the card, and they will boost that check by however many number of symbols match up. So for instance, if I wanted to boost the book, well, I could throw the barricade and discard it, and it would give me the 1 book symbol right there. So that's kind of the advantage, is that you can get rid of cards to boost your skills, but there's a risk because you're getting rid of some good stuff. So what am I going to do? Not going to do that. I'm just going to reach in the bag and hope for the best. And sometimes it's a gamble. And let's really hope that this works out. So I'm going to reach in here, shuffle these around a bit. And I pulled out this guy. And the cloaked figure says -1. If you fail, take 1 horror. Well, guess what? The shroud value was 2, and our intellect was 3, and we got a -1. So we had 2. 2 matches the shroud value. That means we actually successfully got that first clue with the first action. That's really good. So we didn't waste anything there, and now we are 1 clue closer to moving past this trapped card, right? And that's what we're trying to aim to get to. So, and we're allowed to go ahead and spend 2 clues and go to the next card at any time as soon as we're ready. So let's pull the next one. Ooh, and now we ran into trouble. So -2. So now we know we did an intellect check of 3. We're going to take 2 off of that. That leaves 1. 1 is too low, and you can't play cards to adjust your skill after you've already pulled your token. So in this case, it's considered a fail. So because of this, I've used 3 actions. So the 3 actions I used, just to review, is 1, I put down my knife and paid for it using the resources that I had here, and it cost 1. Then I searched or investigated, in the study, and I was successful and found my first clue. And then the second time I investigated, I actually failed. So those are all 3 of my actions. So now the action is complete, and you can move on to the enemy phase. Well, guess what? There are no enemies yet because we're at the very beginning of the game, so enemies haven't come out of the encounter deck yet, so I don't have to worry about that. If there was a hunter keyword involved, then I would have to worry about that. The next thing is upkeep. So it says reset or flip mini cards. Now, I'm not going to do this because I'm not playing with anybody else, but in a 2-player game, when you're done your turn like I just finished, I would flip this over to the grayscale side, and it would just say that my turn is done. But you don't have to do this because nobody else is in the room wondering whether your turn is done. It's just me. So I'm just going to always skip that step because it seems kind of silly when you're playing 1 player. Then it says ready all exhausted cards, which is valid. So every single time you use a particular card, it may ask you to exhaust it, and if it does, you can, you ready them. Or if there's a monster, for instance, that was evaded, they become exhausted, so now they become unexhausted. So that's what that's for, and we don't have to worry about that because nothing is exhausted at this point. And then it says each investigator draws a card and gains a resource. So that's pretty straightforward. So we just come over here to our resource pool and we throw an extra resource token in, and we get 1 new card, and we got ourselves Mind Over Matter. So this is a fast card. You can play only during your turn, and until the end of the round, you may use your intellect as your, I believe that's combat or agility. So that's pretty good if your agility, say for instance, is 2, so which mine is. I can boost it to 3 by using that card. So anyway, so that's now in my rack of cards. And then the very last thing to check for is to make sure that you don't have a hand size of over 8 cards. And because we've just started playing, I've got 5, so we're already good there. And then we would go through the mythos phase. So this is where the beginning of the next round would start. With the beginning of the next round, how this works is you take a Doom token and you place it on the agenda. So I'm gonna go like this. Now we have our first Doom token on the agenda. Then the next step is the agenda, you advance the agenda if the Doom threshold is satisfied. So once we have put 3 Doom tokens on this agenda card, then we will have to flip that agenda card and move forward. And then each investigator draws 1 card from the top of the encounter deck. So we're gonna do this really quick and then we're gonna finish the video. So rotten remains. So we found some rotten remains in the study and it says test your willpower, I believe. And it's a 3 we need. For each point you fail, you take a horror. So I have a willpower of 3 and I think I'm gonna use guts to avoid this because my sanity is quite low at 5 and I don't want to take any sanity damage. So I'm going to use guts before I start this. So I have a 3 on willpower. This is going to add 2 more, so 5 going into this. And we're hoping to get something that works out. 0, perfect. So we passed the test. So this rotting remains is discarded and we're done. So that's a full kind of from when we started with the investigation phase all the way around back to the investigation phase, and now we're back to our first 3 actions. So at this point I'm going to stop the video. This is the very first part of Arkham Horror the card game. I really hope you guys will continue to watch and join in. Please feel free to fire off your thoughts, comments as I go along, because I'd love to hear from you guys. And until next time, keep rolling solo.